So right now, Moscow is on fire following one of the largest Ukrainian drone attacks on the Russian capital since the start of the war. And these videos coming out led one Russian reporter to ask the risky question, quote, "Is everything really going according to plan?" I mean, I can answer that. No, it's not at all. A daylight raid with hundreds of drones striking a target in Moscow that was already struck by Ukrainian drones just 48 hours ago? No. Everything is not going according to plan. But before diving into the details here, let's set the scene because we have unlimited footage at this point coming out of these strikes. What I'm showing right here is a short clip from earlier today. That is a Ukrainian drone flying over Moscow in broad daylight, anti-aircraft fire going off in the background while the refinery burns. Early in the clip, a Russian surface-to-air missile misses the drone. Shortly thereafter, a second interceptor is launched from right in the middle of the target area. The drone circles around and impacts inside of the refinery. In fact, this is even better with the sound on without me babbling in the background. So here we go.
Değme yapıyorlar. Düşe de ozar. Düşe de ozar. Düştü ona. Düştü.
Now, Ukrainian President Zelensky addressed this morning saying, quote, "Tonight, our long-range sanctions once again hit the Moscow region. For the second time in a week, the Moscow oil refinery was targeted. This is a fully justified response to Russian attacks on our cities and communities. It's time to end this war, and Russia must take the necessary steps in diplomacy." The Ukrainian Unmanned Systems Forces said the Moscow oil refinery is one of the 10 largest oil refining enterprises in Russia. Its installed capacity is 11 million tons of oil per year. The enterprise produces fuel and other petroleum products that are used to support the Russian economy and military logistics. A couple of key takeaways here before we get into kind of the Russian cope is probably the best way to put it. Holy cow, is the pro-Russian community pissed off about this morning. We are seeing the results of these mid-range strikes. So it's been almost an air defense system a day for months on end now. That has real consequences. These are the consequences. Russia, just to hammer this home, has more targets available to the Ukrainian drones than they have resources to protect them. They do not have enough air defense assets for the size of the country and the range and the volume of Ukrainian drones. This attack on the Moscow refinery, the stage was set a couple days ago. When Ukraine was looking at it, they launched a number of drones. In that relatively small-scale attack, they were able to identify the best routes in, the best angles to attack these refineries, where the Russian air defense assets were, where there were gaps in their coverage. Once they had that information, still achieving effects on targets 48 hours ago, they swarmed drones, hundreds. In fact, a couple different accounts here. The Russian Ministry of Defense said 992 Ukrainian drones were launched into Russian territory overnight. Are you kidding me? 1,000 drones fired by Ukraine into Russia? Now, that's across the entirety of Russian territory. It was something like mixed numbers, but I've heard between 400 and 500 fired at Moscow. Russia does not have the ability to protect all of Russia. There are too many drones for them to shoot down, and a number of them are now getting through. In fact, there was a video that's is going to be iconic, I think, for this war. I'll play it here real quick of the top flying off of an oil tank. And before we get back into kind of the serious stuff here, I do want to share some of these memes. There's too many to go through. Crazy picture, right? I'll put a couple of them up here on the screen in the description, the video description. I'll have a link over to a couple different threads on X or Twitter that are compiling what people have put together, kind of the jokes around this exploding fuel tank. Pretty significant image if you think about it. 4+ years into the war and a refinery in Moscow is blowing up in broad daylight. Now, the New York Times was able to speak with some Russian citizens in the region. They said, quote, "Black smoke from a burning oil refinery filled the Moscow sky. The city's 4 airports were urgently closed, and part of the busy highway that rings the Russian capital, metropolis of 13 million, was shut down." They spoke with Nikolai, 44 years old, who lives in a neighborhood northeast of the refinery. He said that the neighbors in his mostly working-class area appear to be spooked. but many are still unable to make the mental link between Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the attacks at home. Quote, people in the yard outside this morning go around asking something like, how is this possible? I see anger and confusion, but I don't think people can put two and two together. It's like they were told for a long time not to look up, and now it's as if they've lifted their heads for the first time, and it's impossible to not look up. Ukraine has, and for some time now, brought the war home to Russia. Veteran notes, a Russian mill blogger said, quote, in Moscow, many people finally learned that the war is actually going on. And he said, quote, well, you have to admit, it looks very strange when you're told on TV for 4 years only about victories, how everything is going well. And then there are explosions, burning houses, and infernos from flaming refineries right outside your window in the capital of Russia. Naturally, people start asking questions. Is everything really going according to plan? Again, it's not. It is very hard. This has all happened so slowly over a period of 4 years. It was unthinkable at the beginning of this war when Russian aircraft started striking targets throughout Ukraine and were striving to achieve air superiority, what most people thought they would accomplish in a matter of a day, couple days, if not a few weeks. Instead, we're more than 4 years in and there's 500 drones hammering down sensitive targets inside of the Russian capital city. Another Russian mill blogger here, Reserve Pioneer, said, quote, a couple of years ago, they said we would cut off the gas and fuel to the Ukrainians, and winter on their end would be their end because they would start freezing. I share this belief, considering such a course of events logical and correct. But damn it, somehow the Ukrainians managed to make the fuel collapse hit us instead. And just yesterday, we talked about a Reuters article talking about the shortage of fuel inside of Russia. For the first time I can think of, Russia, a net fuel exporter, one of the largest fuel exporters in the world, is set to import fuel this month. And we're seeing shortages pop up in a number of areas across Russia, certainly having challenges down in Crimea and the occupied territories in the south, but that is starting to creep into Russian territory as well. These refinery strikes don't help. Now, it gets complicated because how much does one refinery strike impact the domestic fuel consumption versus the export volume, and how does that impact the overall war effort? And it's not always a direct one-to-one, but the bottom line is when a major refinery, a top 10 refinery like this goes up in smoke, to my understanding, hours later, the fires are still being put out, all right? So if nothing else, this is offline for a day, a couple days, probably going to be a while to repair all that damage. That builds. When there's already a fuel shortage and then more refineries get hit, more logistics get hit in the south, this is the type of thing that can have a snowball effect on the Russian war effort. And they're picking up on this inside of Russia. Again, what we try to do on this channel a lot is monitor some of the most pro-Russian accounts, the ones that want Russia to win the war, and in most cases say Russia isn't going hard enough. A lot of these channels regularly, when an attack like this happens, they turn around and say, kill more Ukrainian civilians. All right, so these are very pro-Russian accounts that are a mix of upset and maybe saddened or depressed as to what they're seeing. Fighter bomber, kind of a kind of the top Russian account when it comes to understanding air power in the Russian military, said, quote, well, what's there to comment on? The clouds are gathering over us in more ways than one. Then Maxim Kalishnikov, another Russian war correspondent, said, quote, he talked about the challenges that Russia is going to be facing if this continues. He talked about how there's going to be extremely unpopular measures popping up to bridge the budget gap if this continues. He says this is exactly what the Ukrainians are counting on. Drone warfare, cutting off logistics, attacks on refineries, a fuel crisis, efforts to torpedo the economy. All of this is part of a systematic strategy. The enemy has shifted the war to our rear. We are now probably 3-4 months into this pretty sustained Ukrainian campaign to hammer Russian logistics and their infrastructure, keeping this war afloat. Every day, every week, we're seeing additional footage of the effectiveness of these strikes. And, you know, folks will often say, well, look, Russia just carried out a missile strike in Ukraine. Look, Russia just got drones through to Kyiv. Correct. And that has been happening since day one. So the major change here is that Ukraine is able to inflict similar, if not more, damage inside of Russia. I would argue that the Ukrainian attacks in Russia actually have a bigger impact right now because the entire world, to include Ukraine and the Ukrainian civilians, expect missile strikes in Kyiv. They expect drone attacks everywhere across the country. The citizens of Russia are not expecting the war to come home, and it is more so every single day. Now, I do think we're a long ways away from the people rising up and actually saying enough is enough. We're not going to fight this war anymore, and maybe pressuring Putin into some sort of negotiated settlement. But seeing refineries go up in smoke, going to the gas station and there's no fuel to fill up your car, starting to see those shortages does have some impact. And it's a net positive impact for the Ukrainian war effort than if it wasn't happening at all. So pretty significant that this is playing out. Crazy to wake up to that this morning. And then quick fundraiser update for you guys. I've got a thank you video just sent over this morning, a couple hours ago, from the 5th Squadron Gur Legion. We helped them pick up a number of things, to include some cars just a couple months ago. We have an ongoing campaign with Car for Ukraine that'll be linked in the description and pinned comment below. But here's a quick thank you from the fighters of 5th Squadron Gur Legion.
Hi, this is Rachel from Protective Volunteer, and I'm here with some of the fighters who are on the Southern Front. And we want to say a big thank you to Preston Stewart, who helped us fundraise over $50,000 to help them with their vehicle needs, especially vehicle repairs, which they really need. And so we're just giving a shout out to you and thank you so much for everything you did.
Thank you, Stewart.
Thank you very much.